10 things that don't make sense after 61. What if I told you that everything you once worried about, everything that consumed your thoughts and dictated your choices, suddenly starts to fade away after 61? The expectations, the obligations, the endless need for approval, they simply lose their power, and in their place, clarity, freedom, a new way of living that finally makes sense. For decades we chase things that we believe define success, status, possessions, pleasing others, meeting expectations that were never truly ours to begin with. But then comes a moment of realization. So much of what once felt urgent now feels unnecessary. This stage of life isn't about giving up, it's about waking up. It's about letting go of the things that drain us, weigh us down, and no longer serve the life we deserve. And when you do, you unlock a kind of peace, joy, and fulfillment that younger generations can't even imagine. Today, we're going to uncover 10 things that stop making sense after 61, and why letting go of them might be the most liberating decision of your life. If you're ready for a perspective shift that could change everything, stay with me. And before we begin, hit subscribe, because this journey is just getting started. 1. Holding on to toxic relationships. Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher, once said, "Care about what other people think, and you will always be their prisoner." For centuries, wise men have warned against the burden of keeping company with those who diminish our spirit. Consider the story of the great Roman statesman Cicero. In his later years, he realized that many he once called friends were merely using him for power and influence. The moment he stepped away from these parasitic relationships, his mind became clearer, his heart lighter. True wisdom lies in knowing when to walk away from those who poison our peace. There comes a time in life when you've seen enough to tell the difference between who is with you and who is simply using you. I learned that lesson the hard way. My childhood friend Robert had been in my life for more than 60 years. We met as boys, sharing laughter in the sun, swapping stories of dreams we thought we'd chase forever. But time has a way of revealing a man's true nature. Through the years, I noticed how Robert never called unless he needed something, a loan he'd never repay, a favor that left me cleaning up his mess, a plea for advice he'd discard the moment it no longer suited him. At first I excused it. After all, wasn't friendship about standing by each other? But as the years passed, I realized something chilling. He was never there when I needed him. When my wife passed, he sent a half-hearted text. When I fell ill, he never visited. And yet, when he needed anything, he expected me to be his rock. I told myself it was loyalty, that I was being a good friend. But deep down I knew I was only keeping him in my life because of history, not because of harmony. Then, at 65, I made a choice that changed everything. One evening, Robert called, voice dripping with urgency, another favor, another rescue mission. But something inside me shifted. I sat in my chair, looking at the framed photo of my late wife, the woman who had always told me, "Your time is precious, give it to those who cherish it." So, I said no. The silence on the line stretched, thick and heavy, and in that moment I saw the truth. He didn't value me. He valued what I could do for him. That was the last time he called. And to my surprise, my world didn't crumble, it expanded. Without Robert's constant negativity, I found more time for my grandson's soccer games, for long walks by the lake, for laughter with people who truly cared. By letting go of the wrong people, I made room for the right ones. Now, I sit here, sipping my coffee, watching the morning light stretch across my kitchen table, and I feel something I haven't in years: peace. So I ask you, my friends, who in your life truly values you? Have you ever held on to a friendship, a relationship, out of obligation rather than love? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. 2. Worrying about what others think. The Greek philosopher Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." He understood something many of us take a lifetime to learn. Seeking approval from others is a never-ending prison. Consider the story of Galileo Galilei, who dared to say the earth revolved around the sun. The world ridiculed him, the church condemned him, but time proved him right. If he had bowed to the opinions of others, we might still believe the sun revolves around us. Truth and authenticity often come with a price, but they also bring the ultimate reward: freedom. I spent the first 60 years of my life living for other people. It started young, being the good child, pleasing my parents, doing what was expected. I went to college because my father wanted me to, married young because my mother said it was time, chose a career that sounded respectable rather than one that made me happy, and I told myself, this is just the way life works. But deep inside I always had dreams of my own. I wanted to be a writer, to paint, to travel without a plan, but I buried those desires under the expectations placed upon me. I smiled at the right moments, played my part well, and felt a quiet emptiness growing inside me. Then, at 62, something happened that changed everything. I was sitting in the doctor's office when he said the words no one ever wants to hear. It could be cancer. We need to run more tests. I left that office and walked straight past my car, past the parking lot, down the street until I found a park bench and sat there, staring at nothing. My entire life flashed through my mind, not the moments of joy, but the years wasted worrying about what others thought, the promotions I chased because they made me look successful, the hobbies I never pursued because they weren't practical, the love I let slip away because others said it wouldn't last. And in that moment, I made a decision. If my time was truly limited, I would spend the rest of it living for myself. The tests came back negative, no cancer, but in a way I had still received a gift, a second chance. I quit my job. I sold the house that was too big for me. I moved to a small cabin near the ocean where I could finally breathe, and for the first time in my life I wrote. Stories poured out of me, stories that had been trapped behind decades of self-doubt. People whispered, of course, why would he leave a good job? Why would he sell his house? What is he even doing? But you know what? I stopped listening, I stopped caring, and I have never been happier. So I ask you, my friends, are you still carrying the weight of other people's opinions? Have you ever made a decision that freed you from the expectations of others? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your journey. 3. Clinging to material possessions. The Buddha once said, the root of suffering is attachment. This is a lesson history has taught us again and again. Consider the story of Alexander the Great, one of the richest, most powerful men in history. At his deathbed, he ordered his hands to be left outside his coffin, empty, for the world to see. Even with all his conquests, wealth, and treasures, he could take nothing with him. The greatest irony of life is that we spend decades collecting things, only to realize too late that none of them truly matter. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who hoarded things, but looking back now, my house was a museum of the past, a shrine to things I no longer needed, but couldn't bear to part with. My wife, Mary, used to joke that I was attached to my things like an old oak tree, refusing to shed its leaves. The attic was filled with boxes of forgotten keepsakes. The closets overflowed with clothes I hadn't worn in years. The garage. You'd think I was preparing for a second life with the amount of tools, furniture, and trinkets I stored away. Then Mary passed. And suddenly all those things felt heavier than ever. I avoided her side of the closet for months. I let the house sit in silence, filled with objects but empty of life. But grief has a way of making you see things differently. One evening as I sat in the dim light of our living room, my eyes wandered to the dusty shelves filled with souvenirs from vacations long past, expensive china we never used, and gifts still in their boxes. And I realized something. I had spent a lifetime collecting things, but what I truly missed was time. Time with Mary. Time I could never get back. The next morning, I started packing. Not just a few things, everything, that no longer served a purpose. I donated the clothes, sold the furniture, gave away trinkets that once felt important but now felt meaningless. The more I let go, the lighter I felt. One afternoon my grandson came to visit. Instead of sifting through clutter, we sat on the back porch, watching the sunset, talking about life. That moment, simple, real, fleeting, meant more to me than all the possessions I had spent decades accumulating. You see, we don't realize how much things own us until we finally let them go. Life isn't about the objects we collect, it's about the memories we create, the love we share, and the moments we cherish. So tell me, my friends, what are you still holding on to? Have you ever let go of something and felt the weight lift off your shoulders? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your journey. 4. Chasing outdated goals. The great Chinese philosopher Confucius once said, "When it is obvious that the goals cannot be reached, don't adjust the goals, adjust the action steps. History is filled with people who chased one vision of success only to realize later that their true fulfillment lay elsewhere. Take Tolstoy, for example, hailed as one of the greatest writers of all time. Yet after achieving literary success he fell into deep despair, realizing that wealth and fame had not brought him peace. He abandoned his old ambitions and devoted himself to a simpler life of faith, family, and philosophical reflection. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to let go of a dream that no longer fits the person we've become. For most of my life, I believed success meant more work, more money, more recognition. I spent decades climbing the corporate ladder, sacrificing time, sleep, even my own health, believing that if I just reached the next milestone, I'd finally feel complete. And I did reach those milestones. I got the promotions, I made the money, I earned the respect of my peers. But every time I arrived at a new level of success, I felt nothing. Then at 63, my body decided it had enough, a minor heart attack. Not life-threatening, but enough to scare me. As I lay in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, something hit me. I had spent my life pursuing goals that no longer made sense. My ambitions had been written in my 20s, yet here I was, in my 60s, still chasing a version of success I no longer cared about. I thought about all the hours spent in meetings instead of watching my daughter's dance recitals, the vacations I postponed, the friends I lost touch with, the quiet hobbies I had abandoned because they didn't contribute to my career. What was it all for? So I walked away, not from life, but from the life I no longer wanted. I sold my shares in the company. I downsized my house. I packed a bag and started traveling, not to impress anyone, but because I had always dreamed of seeing the world. And let me tell you, nothing feels better than waking up in a place where no one knows your name, sipping coffee in a quiet cafe, feeling the breeze on your face without a single deadline hanging over your head. Life isn't about how much you achieve, it's about what you achieve. And if your goals no longer bring you joy, then maybe it's time to write new ones. So tell me, my friends, what goal have you been holding on to that no longer serves you? Have you ever let go of an old ambition and found something even better? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your journey. 5. Obsessing over physical appearance. The Japanese concept of wabi-sabi teaches us to find beauty in imperfection. The philosopher Seneca echoed this sentiment, saying, "Time discovers truth." In ancient cultures, wrinkles were seen as marks of wisdom, gray hair as a crown of experience. Yet today, we live in a world obsessed with erasing every line, covering every sign of time's passage. But consider Michelangelo's David, a sculpture admired for centuries not because it is flawless, but because it carries the touch of time. True beauty isn't in perfection, it's in the depth of a life well lived. I remember the first time I noticed the lines around my eyes. I was 48, standing in the harsh bathroom light, pulling at my skin like a sculptor trying to reshape clay. A ridiculous act, I realize now. But back then, I thought aging was something to fight, something to fix. I started dyeing my hair the moment silver strands began to show. I avoided cameras, fearing the sight of my own changing face. Society had taught me that youth was my worth, and I believed it. Then came my 60th birthday. My daughter Sarah threw me a party, a beautiful evening surrounded by friends and family. But as I sat among them, watching the younger women with their smooth faces and perfect smiles, I felt something gnawing at me. A quiet voice whispering, "You are past your prime, you are fading." That night, as I washed off my makeup, I did something I hadn't done in years. I stared at my own reflection. Really stared. I saw the lines near my eyes, deep from years of laughter. The gray in my hair, each strand a testament to the life I had lived. The soft skin of my hands, worn from comforting loved ones, from hard work, from decades of holding on and letting go. And for the first time, I didn't feel disappointment. I felt pride. Why had I spent so many years trying to erase the proof of my existence? My wrinkles weren't flaws, they were stories, proof that I had loved, cried, endured, grown. Out that day on, I stopped coloring my hair. I stopped hiding from the camera. Instead of mourning the face of my youth, I honored the face of my wisdom. Now when I look in the mirror, I don't see someone fading, I see someone becoming. So I ask you, my friends, what do you see when you look at yourself? Do you still measure your worth by youth, or have you come to embrace the beauty of your years? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your journey. 6. Engaging in obligatory social activities. Lao Tzu once said, "Care about people's approval and you will be their prisoner." In ancient times, the great thinkers understood something that many of us take a lifetime to learn. Obligation is not the same as connection. Consider the story of Diogenes, the Greek philosopher who rejected societal customs and expectations. When invited to a lavish banquet he had no interest in attending, he simply responded, "I would rather chew on dry bread in peace than feast in anxiety." His lesson? Time is a precious currency. Spend it wisely, and never out of guilt. For years I attended every family event, every neighbor's dinner party, every social gathering, not because I wanted to, but because I thought I had to. I sat through long dinners with people who barely knew me, listening to conversations that drained me, nodding along to stories I'd heard 1,000 times before. I smiled, I played the role, and I went home exhausted, wondering why I felt lonelier in a crowded room than I did in my own company. Then, one afternoon, I received yet another invitation, this time to my cousin's birthday party. I hadn't spoken to him in years, yet I was expected to show up, sit through the evening, and pretend we were close. I stared at the invitation for a long time, feeling that old, familiar pressure creeping in. But something inside me shifted. I thought about my best friend Margaret, who had passed away the year before. In her final months she had told me something I never forgot. "You know what I regret? The hours I wasted on people who didn't feed my soul. I wish I had spent that time laughing with the people I truly loved." That day I picked up the phone and called my cousin. I told him I wouldn't be coming. I didn't make excuses. I didn't lie. I simply said, "I hope you have a wonderful time, but I'm choosing to spend my evening differently." And you know what happened? The world didn't end. The guilt I expected to feel never came. Instead, I spent that evening sitting on my porch, watching the sunset, listening to music I loved, feeling free for the first time in years. Now, I say no often, not out of selfishness but out of wisdom. Time is a gift, and I refuse to waste it on anything that doesn't bring me joy. So tell me, my friends, how many times have you said yes when you really wanted to say no? Have you ever walked away from an obligation and felt lighter because of it? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your journey. 7. Comparing yourself to others. The Greek philosopher Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." To live authentically, we must stop comparing ourselves to others. Comparison only blinds us to the richness of our own unique journey. The life of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius offers a powerful example. Despite his vast power and wealth, he often wrote in his journals about the futility of measuring his life against the standards of others. He understood that true success is found within, not in how we measure up to others' achievements. Embrace your own path. It's the only one that truly matters. I spent many years comparing myself to others. When I was younger, it felt like a constant race, a competition I didn't even know I had signed up for. I looked around me and saw people with grander homes, fancier cars, more exciting careers, and bigger families. I admired them, envied them even, thinking that I was somehow less because I didn't measure up to their version of success. At first, it didn't bother me much. I was focused on building my own life, my family, my career, but as time went on, I began to feel a deep sense of inadequacy. Why wasn't I as successful as them? Why didn't my life look like theirs? I spent decades chasing after the same things others had: financial success, social standing, material possessions. I climbed the ladder, thinking that each rung I climbed would make me feel whole. But with every achievement I felt emptier, and the more I compared myself to others, the further I drifted from my own sense of peace. It wasn't until I was in my late 60s that I realized how much energy I had wasted. One quiet evening I sat on my porch watching the sunset, and for the first time I felt something I hadn't felt in years: contentment. I realized that the reason I had always felt dissatisfied was because I had been living someone else's idea of success. I wasn't living my own life, I was measuring it against a scale I didn't even agree with. That night, I made a decision. I would stop comparing my life to others. Instead, I started looking inward, appreciating the quiet moments, the memories I had created, the people who truly loved me. I stopped focusing on what I didn't have and started valuing what I did. I began to see that my life, with all its ups and downs, was rich in ways that were uniquely mine. Now, when I look at others, I don't see what I lack. I see them for who they are, not as a reflection of my own worth. I've learned to embrace my journey, the mistakes, the triumphs, the quiet moments, and the loud ones. My life is mine and no one else's. So, my friends, I ask you, how often have you found yourself comparing your journey to someone else's? Have you learned to embrace your path, flaws and all? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your reflections. 8. Overlooking mental and emotional health. In the words of the Buddha, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. In ancient times, healers understood that nurturing the mind was as important as caring for the body. Consider the story of King Ashoka, who after witnessing the devastation of war, turned to meditation and compassion to heal his soul. He discovered that inner peace and emotional balance were the true sources of strength and wisdom. His journey teaches us that prioritizing mental and emotional health through mindfulness, reflection, and genuine connection transforms our lives. Embrace self-care for your mind, for it is the wellspring of enduring joy. I spent most of my life focused on keeping my body in good shape, exercising, eating well, and taking care of my physical health. But it wasn't until my later years that I truly learned the importance of caring for my inner self. I remember a time in my 50s when I was overwhelmed by the weight of life's demands. I had friends, family, and a never-ending stream of responsibilities. Yet, despite all my efforts to maintain my physical health, I felt a profound emptiness inside. I was constantly anxious, my mind a whirlwind of worry and regret. One quiet evening, while sitting alone on my back porch, I began to reflect on the teachings of an old friend who once quoted the Buddha's words. It struck me that I had been neglecting the very essence of who I was, the emotional and mental part that craved peace, connection, and love. Determined to change, I started a simple daily practice of meditation. I set aside just a few moments each morning to sit quietly, focus on my breath, and let go of the stresses that had accumulated over decades. Gradually, I noticed a transformation. The constant anxiety began to ebb away, replaced by a sense of calm and clarity I hadn't felt in years. I reached out to friends, reconnected with long-forgotten passions, and even found time to attend community gatherings where I could share and listen to stories of life's challenges and triumphs. Each small act of self-care enriched my spirit and reminded me that while the body ages, the mind and heart can remain youthful and resilient when properly nourished. I learned that true health encompasses both body and mind, and that mental well-being is not a luxury but a necessity. So I ask you, dear friends, have you taken the time to nurture your inner self? How do you find peace amidst life's chaos? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear your journey toward emotional well-being. 9. Feeling guilty for prioritizing yourself. Buddha wisely proclaimed, you yourself as much as anybody in the entire universe deserve your love and affection. Reflecting on history, I recall the story of Empress Wu Zetian who, despite the weight of ruling an empire, understood the necessity of self-nurture. Amid relentless responsibilities, she carved moments for personal reflection and rejuvenation, realizing that a well-tended soul is essential for wise leadership. Her example teaches us that caring for oneself is not selfish, but a vital act of self-respect and strength. Embracing self-care empowers us to better serve those we love and to live with inner peace and clarity. I spent my life believing that my value was measured by how much I could give, raising children, supporting my spouse, and comforting friends through their storms. I rarely paused, always putting others' needs ahead of my own. Over the decades, this self-denial became my default. I often felt a heavy guilt when I dared to take a moment just for myself, as if my very being was supposed to be a bottomless well for everyone else's troubles. But in my later years, after long nights of silent reflection and the inevitable ache of exhaustion, I reached a crossroads. One chilly autumn evening, while nursing a quiet cup of tea, I realized I had neglected the most important person in my life, me. That realization came like a gentle awakening, a reminder that I was not meant to be perpetually self-sacrificing. I began to understand that by caring for myself, I was actually enriching my capacity to care for others. I started small, dedicating a few precious moments each day to reading, meditating, and even taking leisurely walks that filled my heart with quiet joy. With each day, the guilt slowly lifted as I embraced the truth that self-care was an act of courage and love. It was not a betrayal of my past commitments, but a necessary evolution into a healthier, more fulfilled version of myself. I learned that the well of my spirit could only be replenished if I allowed myself to be its caretaker. And so, as I sit here reflecting on the years gone by, I find peace in the balance I've achieved between giving and receiving. I invite you, dear friends, to consider, when was the last time you allowed yourself the gift of self-care? Please share your experiences and thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear your journey towards embracing your own well-being. 10. Fearing the future or death. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once counseled, "Begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life." In ancient Rome, men and women learned that an obsessive fear of what lay ahead could rob them of the beauty of the present. Consider the wisdom of the Epicureans, who taught that by cherishing each small moment, one could achieve true peace. Their message endures today. Life's fleeting nature calls us to embrace every day with gratitude, rather than be consumed by the dread of an uncertain future or the inevitability of death. I spent countless years haunted by the shadow of tomorrow, worrying about the inevitable end, about the unknown that lurked in every new dawn. In my youth, I was paralyzed by fear, letting the possibility of loss and death dictate my actions and rob me of the joys of today. As I grew older, those worries multiplied until they became an ever-present weight. It was only when I reached my late 60s, after enduring many storms of heartache and loss, that I discovered a simple truth. Life is not meant to be lived in fear of the future, but celebrated in the present. One crisp winter morning, while sitting by my window watching frost painting delicate patterns on the glass, I had an epiphany. I realized that every moment, whether filled with laughter or tears, is a treasure, a gift that deserves our full attention and gratitude. I began to practice mindfulness, focusing on the small wonders, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the soft murmur of the wind through the trees, the gentle smile of a neighbor. These everyday miracles transformed my perspective. I learned to replace anxiety with a deep sense of appreciation for the now, understanding that clinging to fears only diminished the precious moments unfolding before me. I embraced each day as it came, not as a prelude to the inevitable end, but as a new beginning full of potential, joy, and hope. In letting go of my fear of the future and death, I found a profound sense of liberation and peace that enriched my remaining years. So I ask you, dear friends, how often do you allow fear to steal your joy? Please share your reflections in the comments. I would love to hear how you embrace the present and find peace amid life's uncertainties. Aging isn't about loss, it's about gaining the freedom to choose what truly matters. As we journey through our later years, we have the wisdom to let go of unnecessary stress, outdated beliefs, and toxic influences. This opens the door to a life filled with deeper joy, richer connections, and genuine fulfillment. When we release what no longer serves us, we create space for love, growth, and new adventures. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to share in the comments which of these 10 things are you ready to let go of. And if you found value in this video, please subscribe for more insights on living a meaningful and joyful life after 60. Remember, every day is a fresh opportunity to live fully. Thank you for watching.